Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, the Project Safe Neighborhoods FY19 Grant Announcement, hosted by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. At this time, I would like to turn it over to our first presenter.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss the details of the forthcoming 2019 PSN Formula Grant Solicitation. My name is Kate McNamee. I am a Senior Policy Advisor at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, where I oversee the PSN work for the Policy Office, and I work hand in hand with Steve Fender, who you will hear from later in the presentation, to manage Project Safe Neighborhoods for BJA. I know that the solicitation has been eagerly awaited, so we are providing you with a preview of the details prior to its official release. So today we will go over the anticipated contents of the solicitation, including its purpose area and its purpose and goals, objectives, who is eligible to apply, how the funding is allocated to districts, key differences from last year's solicitation, the sections of the application you will need to provide, additional resources you can confer with as you put your application and plan together, and then we will take questions at the end. So we have a lot to cover, so let's jump into the next slide. So, the purpose and goal of PSN. PSN has existed for almost 20 years. It has changed its approach between formula and competitive awards and has certainly been reinvigorated and has received additional support under the current administration. But its purpose and goals have remained the same. It is designed to reduce violent crime through establishing and expanding coordination, cooperation, and partnerships among local, state, tribal, and federal law enforcement agencies in all 94 federal judicial districts. The goal is to reduce violent crime through established comprehensive approaches that not only use targeted enforcement efforts, which are of course a very important part, but also leverage community engagement and partnerships, prevention approaches, and reentry efforts to effect lasting positive changes in public safety across the country. Next slide, please. So in its continued support of the PSN program, DOJ's objectives are to assist communities in supporting the implementation of effective programs and strategies that PSN task forces can use to prevent, respond to, and reduce violent crime, support the use of intelligence and data to identify the places and people who are the drivers of violence and criminal activity, engage and foster collaboration with communities experiencing high levels of violence, and create sustainable coordination among federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement officials, all of whom are key partners in violent crime reduction. Next slide, please. As is always the case, eligible applicants are PSN team fiscal agents for the federal judicial districts. All fiscal agents must be certified by the relevant District United States Attorney's Office, and we can't emphasize enough the importance of that certification. So who are eligible USAO certified fiscal agents? These include states, units of local government, educational institutions, faith-based, and other community organizations, private, nonprofit organizations, and federally recognized Indian tribal governments. And so for details on the responsibilities of a fiscal agent, please see page 5 of the solicitation. And for fiscal agent certification process, you can visit the BJA website at bja.gov/programs/PSN/cert process. And we can provide you with more information there as well. BJA recommends that districts select their current PSN fiscal agent or consider using the state BJA recommends the districts select their current PSN fiscal agent or consider using their state administering agency, their SAA, for DOJ funding, because SAAs may better leverage state resources to assist in the implementation of the PSN initiative. And we can also provide a list of SAAs on the OJP website at ojp.gov/SAA/. Now, just a note that if an applicant is a fiscal agent or other entity that has not received the required certification by the local USAO, the application will not be considered for funding. And all recipients and subrecipients, including any for-profit organization, must forego any profit or management fee, and that is a standard BJA requirement. Next slide, please. So the PSN solicitation is anticipated to be released by this coming Monday, April 22nd. The projected close date will be June 25th, 2019. And when released, please double check the close date, as that is a crucial piece of information for your planning. Next slide, please. So how much will your award be? This is a question we're getting a lot, and it's an important one. Each federal judicial district is eligible to apply for a funding allocation based on its violent crime rate and population. And BJA expects to make 93 awards based on the formula described in this solicitation and in this webinar. And the award period will be up to 36 months, beginning October 1st, 2019. Now, due to the federal shutdown and other delays, we do not yet have the information we need to release the official funding allocations. So we will post it as soon as the information is available. But in the meantime, so we don't delay the application process, fiscal agents should submit their application for the amount of $1 as a placeholder until we can finalize the award amounts. We will notify applicants to revise their amounts in GMS with the correct allocation as soon as we have it available. Same as FY18, fiscal agents can use up to 10% of the allocation for award administration. And a new twist in FY19, the authorizing legislation for PSN includes a requirement that 30% of PSN funding be used to support gang task forces and their activities in response to organizations engaged in violent crime, firearms offenses, human trafficking, and drug trafficking. The solicitation details how you should address that in your application. Next slide, please. So we have renamed the Strategic Action Plan. It is now the Grant Action Plan for FY19 to ensure that information requested is directly related to the grant-funded activities. The timeline is the same as the FY18 SAP process, 6 months, and a template will be provided to guide your gap development. And additionally, as part of the gap development, all award recipients will be asked to identify potential gaps or training needs associated with their projects. BJA will work with awardees, the PSN TTA providers, and BJA's NTAC to identify possible provision of these services. And we also want to hear about the good work you are doing. So periodic reports are required in accordance with your grant conditions, and you may be invited to give presentations and briefings to share information on your strategy and outcomes. And finally, a final analysis report of the program's implementation and outcomes submitted to BJA at the conclusion of the project is required as well. This may be produced by the district's research partner if they have one, or the information can be included in your final categorical progress report at the grant's closeout. Next slide, please. We wanted to provide a quick overview of the differences between last year and this year, some of which will make the PSN community very happy, we hope. Regarding the budget, this year we do not have final budget numbers, So as I mentioned earlier, so fiscal agents should submit their application for $1. And we know this sounds odd, but it is simply a placeholder until we have final numbers. And this is a method we've used for other programs when budget information is not yet available. So once the FY19 allocation amounts are available, applicants will be notified, as I stated earlier. So allocations for fiscal agents at up to 10% of the award remains the same, but there is that additional requirement to devote 30% of PSN funding to support gang task forces as referenced in the previous slide. Finally, for this slide, in terms of certification of compliance with 1373, instead of compliance via a separate form and process, no form is required this year, and there will be a special condition placed on the award to address this instead. Next slide, please. Last year, a sub-award competition was required to award funds, and truly excellent news is that there is no competition required for subrecipients for FY19, which will greatly streamline your efforts. However, you will need to disclose your proposed subrecipients in your application. And finally, we will be having another PSN conference in 2020. We expect it to be larger than last year's and are requiring award recipients to put aside funds to support the attendance of 3 non-federal members of the task force's participation in the conference. We are working with Maine Justice on the date and location of the conference now and plan to share that information probably over the summer. So now I will turn things over to my colleague, Steve Fender, to discuss other details related to your application.
For those that are submitting, so that document is your best guide. On this slide, we list some of the required items to be submitted as part of your application for 19. You'll note the 424 is completed as part of your application and includes information about your organization, the organization type, program, the point of contact, etc. If you're required to participate in the intergovernmental review, please be sure to do so and see your state point of contact for more information on that review. We have specific instructions in the solicitation for this process. So once released, you'll have everything you need to know regarding that. It's governed by an executive order. We have a link in there to the website. All the POC information is in there for those that aren't familiar. If you're managing grants, you're probably well familiar, but I thought I'd mention it here. Each fiscal agent must submit their certification letter, as Kate mentioned. We will not move forward with the application until I receive those. We'll review that. If it's missing, I'll reach out to you, but this should be a pretty standard practice for those that are previous grantees. The abstract and program narrative are required, and we'll have a little more information about the specifics for those in an upcoming slide. If you plan to include indirect costs, please provide your indirect cost rate. We, as Kate mentioned, you can use up to 10% of this grant for administrative purposes, and some entities use their indirect cost rate as part of the cost justification. So if you have that rate, please include it, make sure it's up to date. And finally, a timeline is required, so please note that the project period for these grants is up to 3 years. Next slide, please. It's unlikely to apply here, but if a tribal entity is selected, we'll need the tribal authorizing resolution. We also require a financial management and internal controls form that we've been updating over the years. A link to that document is in the solicitation. Again, back to my original point I made previously, all the documents you need are right in the solicitation. We're doing an overview here. So if you have any questions about that, it should be clear to you, as clear as we can make it in the solicitation document. That form is required. There's also a lobbying disclosure, as with all of our grants. So that link, a link to that is in the solicitation. You'll need to attach that as part of your application. All pending applications should be provided in a separate document. If you don't have any pending grant applications, then please just provide a statement a separate statement that states there are no pending applications for like projects, and the goal of our efforts here is to identify duplication. So we don't want to fund the same project twice, so we require a statement on the part of the fiscal agent to clear that up for us, or flag it for further review if needed. Importantly, each application must also include information regarding communication with the Department of Homeland Security and/or Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Each applicant must provide responses to a few questions in a separate document. These 2 questions, along with the required documentation, should you answer them in the affirmative, is that must be submitted for all applications. This is similar to last year. Important to note, change from last year, change for this year from last year, is that same requirement is still has to be passed through to all tiers, and by that I just mean any subrecipients that you may make. However, we are no longer collecting that material, so you must obtain it, the same answer to the same questions, obtain those certifications, and keep them on file as the primary applicant or fiscal agent. Important reminder as it relates to all the requirements that we're going through here, as you make subawards, all requirements have to be passed through to the subaward. So as we walk through some of the application requirements, these are things to think about that will also apply to the subrecipients. And just I have another reminder here on the fiscal agent certification, and then on to the next slide, please. I mentioned a minute ago about the abstract as part of your application requirements. So just a few more details. We're looking for here is a summary of your proposed project and 400 words or fewer. It should be written for a general audience and include the project period, crime rate and crime drivers, your geographic focus, and list key partners. Next slide, please. Okay, a few more details on the program narrative, which is also an application requirement that I hope you're well familiar with. For the program narrative, we're looking for a clear description of the PSN grant strategy to be implemented with the grant funds. This should include a plan for implementing the PSN grant supported activities as intended by your PSN task force. Please also provide information about the members of the proposed task force, subrecipients, the fiscal agent, and the anticipated partners and collaborators who will support the implementation of the grant-funded activity. In this document, please also provide a plan for collecting performance measures for the program to BJA in the performance measurement tool. Thank you. A few words on budget. Kate mentioned earlier that we are experiencing a delay in final budget decisions related to government shutdown. So as a result, we don't have our final number that's run by the Bureau of Justice Statistics based on Part 1 crime and population. And then we take our final formula number and allocate the funding to each district just like last year. So as we wait on that, those final numbers and formula review, we still have no choice but to move the applications forward. So when you're in GMS submitting your 424 and the dollar amount, please submit it for $1 and we will move it and move it along. We'll conduct a preliminary review, do all the work that we possibly can, and once we release the final funding, we'll come back to you on it, as Kate mentioned. So we'll end up holding for your budgets, at least initially, because you won't have anything to submit. We recognize that. So, but when you are ready to submit, please use we have an Excel document, a link to the Excel document in the solicitation that presents a 5-year budget, multiple costs, all the cost categories for each year. You may not need it every year, but please use that document. There is a location there for sub-recipients, sub-awards, so you can list your fiscal agent can list their 10%, and then the allocation by plan sub-awards when you're ready to submit your budget. Next slide, please. So here's some information about procurement. We receive a lot of questions about this topic across all of our programs, and so we included a few points here for your review. It's important to understand the difference between a subaward and subcontract. Since we received many questions about this topic, we have a number of guidance documents you see here to help you learn about this and understand the distinction. There are important differences between subaward and subcontract that your fiscal agent needs to know, and I encourage them to review these materials closely. In short, the fiscal agent is likely making subawards to a local law enforcement, for example, and depending on the activity, the law enforcement agency may enter into a contract that has to be competed. If they're funding, for example, if they're buying police equipment, that would be a contract, but you would have made a subaward to the entity who would then possibly, if they're buying equipment, need to enter into a contract to purchase that equipment. At that time, they would need to compete it. Whereas subawards only have to receive authorization from BJA. So I ask you, please review this guidance and let us know if you have additional questions after the awards are made. A key distinction as it relates to making subawards and contracts using federal funds. Next slide, please. All subrecipients that you intend to make must receive approval from BJA. I think we've mentioned that a few times. It's important to note. This can be accomplished by submitting the information you see here at the time of application or at a later date as needed. We recognize that you may have to confer with your PSN task force to determine who you're going to make the subgrants to. So if you're not ready, you can submit your application without it, but we'll need the same information for all subawards before you're ready to spend the money or to send the money to them. So it's important that this is required for all subrecipients. More guidance than this is on the solicitation. Okay, and there you see Kate's contact information for any questions. Next slide, please. And then my contact name and contact information. And one more slide, please. Okay, I'm not going to turn it back over to Kate to give a few updates on TTA resources. Kate?
Thanks, Steve. Shameless plug, because we know you've already given us some time today, but I wanted to let you know of a valuable webinar happening tomorrow at noon Eastern Time that will detail the resources available under the new PSN Training and Technical Assistance Program. So as background, BJA has devoted $3 million to support tailored on-call assistance to you and your PSN partners on a variety of topics in partnership and in coordination with your DOJ support team. We will discuss how we can help you with all aspects of your efforts, from the PSN task force strategy development to finding a research partner to meeting your grant requirements. And everything in between. So we would love to have as many PSN coordinators, LECs, and partners participate so that you can learn what resources we have to assist you in your PSN project management and strategy implementation. And we do this because we know that PSN is a complex endeavor and much has been asked of you. And we want to give you whatever tools are needed for you to be successful. So please join us. And I look forward to seeing hopefully all or most of you tomorrow online again. So now I'll turn it back to Mary Jo to close things out and open up questions.
Hello, everyone. How are you? There's a few resources showing on your screen if you find that you might need them, including the DOJ Financial Guide. In addition, if you have any questions about the solicitation or you need assistance, you can email NCGRS at grants@ncgrs.gov, and they will work with Steve and Catherine to get you an answer. And then also, BJA has a grant application applicant education series that was recorded earlier in this year. There were 4 live webinars. They are each housed on the BJA website, and so you could go back and review those webinars if you would like. At this time, we will open it up to questions. We do not have any questions at the moment, so you have some time. You have Kate and Steve here available at your disposal. Please feel free to ask them anything that you might might come up. Again, if you think of something afterwards, you can always contact NCJRS, and I will put that slide back up. Okay, so some questions are coming through. If we already had our SAP approved and fiscal agent has solicited RFPs, how much of the process do we have to redo?
Is that to me, Steve? Would you like me to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can come up with an answer,
Yeah.
but either way, it's fine.
Well, I mean, it will be a new award. And so if it's a continuation of your current PSN strategy, a lot of your work is already done for you, and you'll just have to outline the grant-funded activities that will be supported with this new funding, just so that we have a record of it. If you are expanding into new PSN target areas, et cetera, and other activities will be funded. In addition, if you're getting a research partner with this new infusion of funding, for instance, that would be a new activity that you should outline in your grant action plan.
I'll follow up to that. Just make sure that everyone's clear that this is not a additional money under the previous grant. It's a new grant, new application, new project for all intents and purposes. You may want to continue existing work. However, we will treat this as a separate grant, separate program. You can reuse some of the same materials with some updates if you intend to continue with the same work, but we would expect to see a summary of your new project for review and approval. If you intend to give this money to the same subrecipients, we'll need their information. It's say, hey, here's the group we want to make the money to. I just went through the information regarding subrecipients and approvals. We will need their information. So this is a brand new grant, a new project period, and it needs to be treated as such as it relates to an application at least.
We know it can be confusing. Yeah, sorry. We know it can be confusing when you're doing the same or similar work or expanding on work that's already underway. But for our management purposes, we do treat it as its own entity.
Right, and we'll look for goals and objectives achieved for each program. So you may have similar goals, but when we're looking for compliance as it relates to the use of these grant dollars, we'll want to see how the goals and objectives you have achieved independently across the grant years, whether it's 18, 19, 20, 17, whatever the year is. Good question.
What is the link for tomorrow's webinar?
I believe it's 90 minutes, and that includes questions.
No, they want to know the link on how to register.
Is the link. I'm sorry. I thought you said the length. It was sent out by EOUSA this morning. Mary Jo, can we provide it? If I email it to you, can we provide it on the side?
Yes. Actually, if you could put it in the chat box and send it to me that way, or I can,
okay.
because I'm out of the network. I can't get email right now.
Sure. I will take care of that. Coming to you shortly.
Okay, great. Thank you. Subawards can be delegated and contracts have to be competed. Is this correct?
Well, yes, all contracts, you must show evidence of competition for contracts using grant dollars. Delegated. I'm not sure that's the right word as I understand it, but delegated. Well, all subawards must receive approval. The primary grantee may subaward an amount for an allowable cost. That's the only way I know to answer that question. I'm not sure if that answers it.
I'm going to take the next question. Somebody's asking where they can get a copy of the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will be posted to the BJA website along with the audio recording and a transcript of today's webinar. If you go to their funding page, there will be a link off of the funding page. Same way you found out about, well, you may or may not have found out about the webinar, but there's a little grid. It has a list of all the funding opportunities, and it'll have a link to the page where everything is housed. I hope that made sense. In reference to 8 U.S.C. 1373, looking for clarification whether or not a subaward can receive funding if they are not able to sign a certification, even though it is being held by a fiscal agent?
All requirements for the grants, it has to be passed through the subrecipients. This year, we don't have the form for them to sign. However, the same requirements are in place, but we are just ensuring compliance through special conditions on the grant, and it's essentially the same thing because it's just a different administrative process that we like to think will be a little easier for us. But so when we make a grant, it's an agreement between the government and the non-federal entity to execute our program goals and objectives. And as part of that agreement, we have the award document that is essentially the contract between the government and the NFE. And as part of that rather lengthy document, we have lots of rules and regulations that we include for the authorized representative. And by that, I just mean the person receiving the money. They sign that document, submit it back to us as part of the acceptance. This year, as part of the acceptance, there will be a special condition that it's just like that is very similar to the 1373 Chief Legal Officer document that we required last year. So by signing the acceptance documents, they will be attesting in a similar way to 1373 as they did for the CLO document, as I understand it. So, and what's important to note here, because you asked about subrecipients, is those exact same special conditions and requirements must be passed through to any state or local entity. So I think you asked, like, if they won't sign, can they receive grant money? In this case, if they won't accept that special condition, they will not be in a position to receive grant dollars for the PSN program. I hope that answers your question. It was a long, convoluted answer, but that's what these require.
Before we move on to the next question, just to let everybody know that I did copy the link for the webinar that Catherine mentioned that will occur tomorrow. It is in the chat box. It was sent to all the attendees, so if you go there, you should see it. I'll warn you, it's a very long link, so you will need to copy and paste it into something else. We often determine what we can do with the grant based on the amount of the award. If we do not have the amount, how are we supposed to determine what work and goals we can accomplish if we have no idea what the funding will be? Will it be similar to last year?
Our funding allocation is less. It will be less for 2019, so I'll plan accordingly. I can't provide you any guidance in terms of determining how to use the money. I would follow a similar process, but it would definitely be a smaller amount. If you can't decide how you intend to use the money and you're not in a position to submit that information in the program narrative, you can submit us a document that indicates as much, and we will hold for that attachment until it's been submitted, but continue to process the application.
Also, if I could jump in, Steve, you will also have the opportunity to adjust your plan in the grant action plan. That will capture all of your, funded activities. And so if you have to greatly alter your plan because you did not have as much money or as you thought, then we will work with you to do that.
People are putting questions in the chat. If you would please be kind enough to resubmit those in the Q&A. We have a better ability to keep track of them if you do that, and I don't want to miss answering any of your questions. Can these funds be used to purchase equipment and or programs to track violent crimes and or gang activity?
Steve, I believe the short answer is yes.
Yes, that is the short answer. It has to be, we will review it, but it needs to be for equipment, to determine there's a lot of things here, but this program is just like last year, where it's a U.S. attorney-led effort, supported and determined by the PSN task force. Funding decisions should be made by non-federal, non-conflicted parties. And if all those things are in place and the decision is made to purchase equipment that would support program goals and objectives, and you have articulated that as much in your program narrative and otherwise, then this could be a allowable cost, yes.
Mm-hmm. And your budget will be reviewed in accordance with your PSN strategy.
Right. an action plan, et cetera.
An action plan. Mm-hmm.
The first word of this next question I think is missing, but it says gap. What was called SAP, basically the same as 2018. Would we use this sample as before? I am with the SAA for Maryland, and they had me use a sample SAP as a guide since subrecipients were not decided at the time when I submitted the federal application.
My desire in FY19 is to use a more streamlined template for the gap. I have no desire to make folks reinvent the wheel, as they say. So it likely will be a different template, much more streamlined. If you have not been able to complete an initial action plan, you know, we will have to work with you as individual districts, you know, to figure out a good way forward on that.
Follow up to GAP. Will the GAP be required as part of the grant application or as a condition of the award and due at a later date?
Good question. It's a condition of the award and due at a later date.
Do the subawards have to be completed for 2018? We have had the police department as a subawardee for the past 16 years, and are we really supposed to have this enforcement piece competed?
I'm not sure I understand that question for sure, but is this a question about 2018
FY18?
then?
Yeah, I'll read it again. Do the subawards have to be competed for 2018? Maybe they meant 2019. We have had the same police department as a subawardee for the past 16 years. Are we really supposed to have this enforcement piece competed?
Yes,
Maybe
for 18, no for 19.
Right. But Steve, they can put in for a waiver, correct, if it is the only law enforcement agency in the district, or am I speaking out of turn?
No, you're right. There are circumstances in which a waiver can be considered. I would encourage you to contact your grant manager for details. We've been looking at those and other competition process approvals every day. So if you have questions about that, please contact your grant manager. If you don't know who your grant manager is, contact me or Kate, and we'll take care of that for you.
Yep. And so, but for 19, this is not an issue. For the solicitation that's being released hopefully next week, not an issue.
If the current gang task force can't sign the certification, how do you meet the 30% requirement?
Well, I don't know what we mean by certification. So we have a fiscal agent certification, but because we're not asking for certification for gangs, we are requiring that 30% of the funding is allocated to whatever the definition was, gang task force that also includes a I forget the Kate, or I can't. I'll have to pull up the exact language. We've crafted that. It will be going out. But what is the gang task force and other criminal gangs or something like this? So we require a 30% set aside for that. We have some guidance that we've already finalized that will be going out in support of that. As you know, I mean, this is April. We're making these grants October 1st. So between now and then, once we receive applications, we'll have support regarding the details on it. But I think your question was, the question that I don't think I can answer the question because I don't think that you quite understood the circumstances, but I hope I have described them. Kate, does that sound right?
I would encourage the participant to contact us so we can talk through their particular circumstance. So please get in touch with us. We'd love to talk to you about it. As Steve said, there has been some guidance provided from Maine Justice, and we'll get an answer to your question.
And I am showing Kate's information right now on this screen. I had Steve's up there a little bit ago, and I'll switch back and forth between them so you have a chance to write that down. A follow-up on the assurance in the award. If the agency that was to receive the subaward will not agree to the assurance, what happens to the subaward allocation?
Well, you can make it to another entity that was eligible and willing to certify or sign the special condition. So, I mean, I guess the circumstance, because you shouldn't have released the money to them until everything they have signed. So this is a reimbursement grant. So the mechanism is that we make the grant to the fiscal agent holds the money, and then once subawards are approved and all the holds and everything's in order, the fiscal agent distributes the money to the agency, and they hold the money, and then they use it as a sub, and they still should reimburse using the appropriate financial mechanisms. So they wouldn't receive, and let's say they're funding overtime for street level law enforcement, and they would within their budget categories, their own internal controls, they would pay themselves, basically reimburse themselves. So that based on that model, the primary applicant should not release the money until they have all assurances signed, to use your words. And so if they won't sign it, you can make the subaward to someone else.
And we can work with you. If you're having problems identifying subaward recipients, that's what our training technical assistants, some of that will be for, to really work through your strategy given the constraints
right.
that you need to operate under.
Yeah, we're well aware of some of the difficulties in that. We have spent the last 12 months working with that just about every day. So we're well positioned to support you in choosing some recipients. If you can't find someone or you're having some problems with it, we'll work with you on it. We just produced a document that sort of gave us some alternate options for those that need it. So we'll be ready for that when we need it.
A similar question to the one about the police department that they have used as a sub-recipient for the past 16 years. They have a similar question to their evaluators. Do they need to bring someone in new?
For an evaluator to evaluate the program.
Not for FY19.
Now for that, yeah, you wouldn't have to. Well, it depends. So there are a number of circumstances there that are important to understand. But if you want for 2018 money, you would need to show evidence of competition unless you ask for a waiver. I don't think evaluation services would qualify for a waiver unless I'm misunderstanding what you mean by evaluation. For 2019, it depends on whether or not you're making a subaward or a subcontract. If you're making a subaward, we will review and approve that for liability and authorize it. If you're making a contract, then you would have to have competition for it.
Somebody joined the webinar late and asked if the PowerPoint will be made available. Yes, the PowerPoint, the transcript, and the recording will all be posted to the BJA website. My guess would be the recording will probably be posted last. You'll get a transcript probably before 5 business days. The PowerPoint will follow about that same time frame, and then the recording may be a little bit later, somewhere around there. And that happens to be our last question. So again, case information is showing on the screen while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any other questions. Steve's is up there right now, and Michelle had added their information to the chat box, so you can always copy and paste that from the chat box if you like. So there's another way for you to get that information.
And Mary Jo, can I just add in, you of course always have the ability to contact your PSN support team member. They will refer you to us for grant questions in all likelihood, but feel free to contact us directly as well, as we brief out to your PSN support team regularly, and we can keep them in the loop as well. So we want to make this as straightforward as we can for you, as we know you all have day jobs. So we're here to answer whatever questions you need. So don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, no other questions came through while we were going over that, so I would assume that everything has been asked and answered. Kate, Steve, do you want to end the webinar, or how do you want to handle this?
Well, I just want to thank you, Mary Jo, and your staff for helping put this on today. Again, please, everybody, join us tomorrow if you can, and definitely look for it. It will be recorded. and available to you to view in the future if you can't make it tomorrow regarding the TTA resources that we will have available for you, and just basically the on-call services that we will have available to help you put your strategy together and navigate your PSN journey. So, Steve, anything?
That's it. Thanks all. Great questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.